Okay, let's get started. So thanks for choosing this session. I'm Simon Maple at SJ Maple from Zero Turnaround. So please do follow me on Twitter and tweet about how good the session is or how bad the session is. Some of the tips and tricks you might have about productivity. I always love looking at the tweets afterwards. So please do tweet a lot. This is me. Developer advocate. All I'm going to say on this slide is I'm a developer advocate for Zero Turnaround, who are a company that produce productivity tooling. And as a result of that, this is where my kind of love for productivity comes from. And we're going to be talking about a vast number of different productivity tools, techniques, and mindsets as to how people can improve their productivity. I said 10. I think we're probably going to do more than that, but I just really did that as kind of clickbait, and it worked. So here we go. This is Rebel Labs. Who's heard of Rebel Labs before? Quite a few. Cool. So Rebel Labs is a blog site, a content site where we at Zero Turnaround create a whole bunch of amazing opinionated content. And one of the reports that we wrote was 10 kick-ass technologies modern developers love. And we got information from this based on some of the reports that we do. We have productivity reports that we do every single year. In fact, one's available now as well for the survey open. And we've got loads of information about why developers love productivity, which tools they're using for productivity, and which benefits them the most. And we'll be looking at a bunch of them during this session. So when we actually think about productivity in general, what does it actually mean to improve our productivity? Well, we can make things that aren't fast just go faster. But it's very easy to see that. It's very easy to visualize that and measure that. But we have to make sure that we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it, but we're doing it for good reason. And I've broken it down into 3 parts. The first part is about removing non-essential tasks. And this is really, really important. I'm going to tell you a little story here. I don't know if you've heard of this before, the story with the ladder, the bananas, and the monkeys. Who's heard of this story? Okay, a few, but not many. This is an amazing story. I'll go through it. So basically, I'm not sure if this story is true or whether it's just fabricated, but it's great, so we'll assume it's true. These scientists, they got 5 monkeys in a room, and they had a ladder and some bananas at the top of this ladder. And as you would expect, the monkeys tried to go up the ladder to get the bananas. But every single time a monkey climbed up the ladder to get the bananas, all the monkeys were sprayed with cold water. Okay? So, and essentially, they learned if they go up the ladder, they get sprayed with cold water. And every time one of the other monkeys tried to go up the ladder, all the other monkeys realized what was going to happen. So they dragged him down and beat the shit out of this poor little monkey because they didn't want to get sprayed. Okay? And then it got to a stage where no one climbed up the ladder. No monkeys climbed up the ladder. They saw the bananas, they didn't touch it because they knew the consequence. And then what they did was they took one of these conditioned monkeys out and they put a new monkey that didn't know the rules into this group. And as you'd expect, that monkey tried to go up the ladder. And all the other monkeys grabbed that monkey down and beat the crap out of this poor little monkey. He had no idea why. And they carried on doing that. They kept replacing one conditioned monkey with a fresh monkey that didn't know the rules until all the monkeys were unconditioned. They didn't know the rules, but none of them would go up the ladder. Okay? Now, if they was to introduce a new monkey and that monkey tried to go up the ladder to get the bananas, all the monkeys, for no reason, would then beat the crap out of this poor monkey, and they had no idea why they were doing it. Okay? And this is what we can draw a parallel to what we're doing on a daily basis in our work. Okay? And this is very common when people say you're new to the team. Please tell us if you think there are better ways of doing what we're doing. And the reason is because we are those conditioned monkeys, right? That are doing these things. We're not going up this ladder because we think something's going to happen. But the question, you have to keep asking yourself, am I doing this for the right reason? So next time you're doing something and you think, I hate doing this, I'm not even sure why I'm doing it, remember this story, okay? Because you might be a conditioned monkey. The second thing is optimizing existing tasks. So we've talked about removing tasks we don't need to do anymore. But what about optimizing existing tasks? Some tasks that we do in our day-to-day life, we have to continue doing. But can we remove parts of that? Can we do them in a faster way? And thirdly, retaining awesome tasks. It's very, very easy to remove too much. And actually remove some of the tasks that are important to us. And this is a very important thing. Speed is not our goal here. It's great to be productive. It's great to do things fast. But if it changes the goal that we're actually trying to achieve, then productivity is actually hindering us rather than helping us. So don't try and do something so fast that you're actually altering the goal. So productivity or speed is just a measure of how fast you reach that goal. It shouldn't mutate that goal. So we're going to talk about a bunch of those, use those three pillars almost, and talk through a whole bunch of things. First of all, communications. Who works here as a remote worker? A fair number. Who works with remote workers? Okay, a reasonable number. It is very commonplace right now I work in the UK and I work from home. It's very, very common for people to work remotely. And when you work in a team, it's easy just to chat at the water cooler, whatever, across your table. Communication is extremely important to make better use of people that exist in your team, because sharing knowledge is extremely important. Now, when we talk about sharing knowledge, there's a great tool which we're going to use, which we're going to view here, which many of you possibly use, many of you don't. But it's not just about tools. It's also about your mindset. Okay, a lot of people do stand-ups and they just stand up, they talk a little bit, they think they're agile, and they walk away. And there's actually not much communication there. People aren't actually getting too much out of it. Similarly, when we're talking about the kind of monkey situation, are you actually doing a stand-up because everyone says you have to do a stand-up, or are you actually doing a stand-up because you're trying to pass the correct information that is helping people on your team? So when you're at a stand-up and you're about to communicate to someone, are you saying something because you want to say, look at me, I've done this? Are you saying something because you want to actually provide information that's useful for other people? Who's using this tool? Quite a few people. This is Slack, and we're using Slack at Zero Turnaround. And Slack, we actually use Slack as part of my community groups as well. So the London Java community, which is the London Jug, we use Slack as well. One of the great things I love about Slack compared to other networks, such as maybe Skype, for example, is we use group channels where you can have a topic, where you have a topic of conversation in that channel. But the most important thing about Slack is the open door chat policy. And by this, what I mean is anyone can join your group and anyone can leave your group at any time. So there isn't just this, you'll typically have this core community in that group. So if you have a product, let's say we have JRebel, okay? We have a JRebel engineering group. Typically the core group is JRebel engineers, but anyone can join that group, talk about something, and then leave that group. Okay, there's not this kind of closed door where people can't communicate easily. This is very, very important. And also smart integration. So for example, this open door policy, this isn't something necessarily you can do with Skype. With Skype, you have a closed community and you only invite people you want into that community. Okay. With smart integrations, you can also integrate other products into your Slack environment. We have loads of Slack integrations, from JIRA to RSS feeds and lots of different things in ours. But essentially, it's kind of like a bot that tells you information about your builds, about JIRAs that are created, JIRAs that have been assigned, anything you really want to do with that. And Atlassian, who's not using Atlassian tooling? 1, 2, 3 people. I did this session in last month. No, what day is it? 29th, this month at JFocus. And I had a room full of about 700 people. And we had 10 people who put their hands up. It's absolutely amazing the dominance and I'll almost say monopoly that Atlassian have over communities. I'm not going to talk about it too much because everyone's pretty much using it. But one of the things that I love about Atlassian tooling isn't necessarily a single product, but it's the fact that all the products have such good integrations with each other. So you can create, for example, if I'm in Confluence and I just want to create a JIRA, I can do it from within Confluence as I'm linking to my JIRA. The integrations between them are very, very important. Any questions, comments? Okay, if anyone has any questions, just stop me, throw something at me, or whatever. Okay, tooling. I love this image. Are you too busy to improve? Yes, we're too busy. We can't improve ourselves because we've got too much work on. And there's a big difference between being busy and being productive. Okay, being busy is just not having time to do stuff. Being productive is about prioritizing, doing things for a reason. Busy is just, CPUs can be busy. Doesn't mean they're doing anything good. They're probably just locked in some loop, right? It doesn't mean it's a good thing. Busyness isn't a good thing. So how can we optimize existing tasks in a less than awesome process? Who doesn't use app servers here? There isn't a single person. One person doesn't use an application server. 2 people don't use app servers. 3 people. It's growing. Are people dropping their use?
Spring, is it an application server?
Is Spring an application server? Well, it will deploy on an application server, right? Yeah, well, Spring itself wouldn't be, but if it's running on Tomcat or TC server, then your deployment is an app server. We're going to be talking about the usage of app servers, and we produced this report. Actually, my history, I used to be an IBM developer for about 12 years. Any WebSphere users? One guy that's really unhappy in the middle. He's yeah. What version are you on? No. It's so big you can't even find the version number. Oh, okay, you're not deploying, right? You're just writing for WebSphere. Do you test on WebSphere? No, you don't. What do you test on? So, Tomcat, right? This is really important because we wrote this report, which is about which application servers are best suited to developers. Okay, and we did a whole load of reviewing of many different app servers and a whole bunch of scoring. And we in this category we tested Tomcat, JBoss, Glassfish. This is WebSphere Liberty Profile, which is a cut weight version of the IBM WebSphere app server, and this is Jetty, obviously. And we took about 8 different categories and ranked every single app server based on their capability in that category. So, for example, download and install. I actually did a video which I think lasted about 20 seconds, which was going from nothing to actually installing Tomcat, downloading, installing Tomcat, starting the server, and I think even deploying an application on it from 0 to 20 seconds to actually hosting an application from scratch. Right, it's absolutely incredible. I guess you've never tried that with WebSphere, but maybe something in 20 seconds. But you imagine your Jetties and your Tomcats doing really, really well. We didn't actually include WebLogic and WebSphere here just because we thought it was kind of a bit, wasn't a fair game. But interestingly, we found tooling support very, 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 very good amongst pretty much all of the major servers which were backed by either community or big organizations. Docs and community, the most important was pretty much just the biggest community users. I'm sure everyone has found an exception that they've copy pasted into Google and found one guy who found this exception back in 2003, right? And there's no responses, and you think, how did you fix this? You're the only person who had this problem. It's really important to have a great community backing. We also did some performance metrics because this is really important for if you're using an app server in your development environment. Like this gentleman, he's using Tomcat rather than WebSphere because it's more productive, and that could cause potential other problems in that when you migrate your app from your development to your production environment, you can have mismatches when you do that migration. So we looked at some performance metrics. We have Liberty Profile, Tomcat, Glassfish, Jetty, and JBoss. And we did some startup, deploy, and invoke applications for both Pet Clinic and Jenkins. And we noticed Tomcat was pretty much across the board the fastest app server or thereabouts. One of the interesting things is Jetty has actually been pretty slow with our tests. And we actually talked to the guys, some of the committers from Jetty, and they were saying they have put in so much code recently at the time that we wrote this report that they weren't surprised it was actually lagging behind in performance. I'm not sure exactly how it is now. Liberty Profile really struggled when it came down to its invokes. This is a bit hard on the Liberty Profile actually, because the Liberty Profile has only just been created maybe 4 years ago. So at this point when we did the testing, they weren't so much focusing on performance as much as they were features. When we actually ran with the second version, which is 8554, we actually did notice the performance times did come down fairly significantly, particularly with this Jenkins application. When I did this session at JFocus when I did an app server session at JFocus last year, we actually got the audience to rank which of these metrics they found the most important to them. And from the scores, actually it was Tomcat that came out most significantly, with actually a reasonable lead, followed closely by JBoss. So, but there are a lot of applications whereby features is what drives the application. More and more, when I talk to people, they care more about an application-centric model rather than I'm going to use this application to provide a platform and then base my applications on there. Whereas what a lot of people, particularly with the Liberty profile, a lot of people say, this is my application. What does my application need? And then I'll tune the Liberty profile to exactly say, to bring up the components and services I need for my application. And that's one thing that the Liberty profile does very, very well, which is why, talking about WebSphere, a WebSphere download would be normally about 3 gig. The Liberty profile tends to be around 50 to 70 gig. I haven't looked at it for a while, but that kind of error, because it only provides what it needs to provide. Since this report was put together, Liberty profile is now Java EE 7 compliant. There's an interesting model though that when we talk about retaining awesome tasks, many people, who's a Tomcat user in the room? Loads of people. Many people who are using Tomcat will typically use the vanilla Tomcat and maybe bolt on extras onto that Tomcat environment. So maybe they say, I kind of want to use Tomcat and maybe some EJBs, but I don't want to use one of the bigger application servers. So what they tend to use, or what people have used in the past, is Apache TomEE. Who's heard of Apache TomEE? Okay, a really good number actually. So Apache TomEE is just that. It's actually a Java EE compliant application server based on Tomcat, which uses the same Tomcat look and feel, which uses the same kind of Tomcat configuration. So people who are very used to Tomcat can use TomEE with the ability to actually go the full Java EE route. Was that a question? No. Okay. Okay. So this is to remind that speed is not our goal. Using Tomcat isn't necessarily going to fix the problem of our speed with other application servers. Using an application server that's fit for our application is one of the most important things. Okay, how many Spring users do we have? Okay, a good number of Spring users. Who's heard of Spring Boot? Okay, good number of people. So Spring Boot is the just run application. It's newish model, probably a few years old now actually, and they provide just run applications. And it's just run applications because when you build, you get an artifact that you can just simply run. They call it production ready on their site, and really what they mean from here is you get metrics, you get stats, you get health information from your endpoints, which you can hit very, very easily. And the other thing that they mention is sensible defaults. So from a sensible default point of view, the horrible term convention over configuration is very important to them. They don't want you to have huge amounts of config, lots of XML obviously, and things like that. They don't want that. It's okay. I've got a one-to-one with my there we go. Okay, so it's all about having sensible defaults. So one of my friends, Josh Long, has this amazing sentiment here: make jar not war, because the artifact that Spring Boot will create is actually a jar file. So let's actually take a look. If I was to jump into some code, okay. So actually, if I start at start.spring.io. This is let's see how good my internet is here. Okay, this is start.spring.io is a site that will allow you to choose certain components and then be able to actually generate an artifact, generate a zip file which contains those artifacts. So here, if I was to say I want some perhaps some web feature. Let's say if I wanted a front end, I could even have Vard in. I can choose which build infrastructure I want to actually build my project with. I can create all that, hit generate project, and that will download me, hopefully, depending on my Wi-Fi, a zip file, or not. And that zip file, in fact, luckily, let's can that. Luckily, I've actually grabbed that zip file, I've unzipped it, and I've already dropped that into my Eclipse environment. Now, here we can see this demo application. And there's a couple of interesting things here. First of all, the Spring Boot application. This annotation is going to tell my framework that this is the class that I want to use with Spring Boot. I've added a couple of things here. I've added a REST controller, which means I'm going to create this REST endpoint, and I am using a URL which is /hi/ and then with curly braces name, and that means I can use this variable name as a path variable as a parameter to my method, which I then use by concatenating to hello. So essentially, depending on the URL I create, it's going to determine the hello string that I get back. So I can build this as a Maven project, and if I was to go to here, whoa. Okay, so if I go here right now, I'm in the target directory of this project. Once I build, you'll notice that we get this this jar file. This is the artifact that Spring Boot will provide us. How do I execute this jar file? Java minus jar. You'd think. Okay, you'd think if I was to less this or cat this, I'd get a whole bunch of kind of garbled output, right? But if I was to actually run less on Whoops. If I was to run less on that, you'll actually see it's a bash script. Okay, so the way I run this is actually by executing it. If I was to go through, this is effectively just constructing the environment in which I can actually run my application. As I spin through, all of a sudden, then you'll see my jar. Okay, so this bash script is actually a script that creates the configuration for my jar, which is contained in this file to actually deploy. So if I was to quit out of here and just .star demo, this will actually, after a bit of ASCII art, will deploy. I think this is likely to be a Tomcat server. Oh no! Oh, have I got a Tomcat server started already? I did. You're right. Let me stop this. Okay, so it looks like I had another server on that port. There we go. Started demo application in a few seconds. So this is running a Tomcat server, embedded Tomcat server. Now, if I was to go to this, let's see, what was it? It was 8080. So, yeah. If I was to go to HTTP localhost 8080/hi/voxxed Vienna. If I was to hit that, we'll get that straight away. So just in a few seconds and a slight buggy demo, we get that information straight back. Really, really impressive. One of the other things that I mentioned, actually, where is it? Let me just check. I think it might be here. Nope. It might be here. Yes, there we go. We can hit, and this is the part of Spring Boot which people say is production ready. Okay, we can hit metrics endpoint, which will tell us, for example, how many times that endpoint has been hit, and we can see here this endpoint has been hit just the once. In fact, no, that's a 404. That's pretty good. So 404 has been hit once. But one of the things we could do is if I was to go back and hit this a few more times. Hopefully we'll see my 200. Ah, there it is. My 200 has been hit now 8 times. Okay, so you can see metrics about your production environment. You can also see things like if I was to use the endpoint health, you can see the health of your applications deployed in your Spring Boot container. So yeah, that's Spring Boot. Let me jump straight back here. Oh, one other thing actually that's that I could have done, and this was talking about using convention over configuration. If I did want to change my configuration, one thing I could do is maybe just say I'm going to export here my server port to equal 8008, for example, rather than 8080. And then if I was to run this again, I could actually run my other server at the same time. So you can easily set things on your command line, on your path, that will change the configuration of your environment. So for example, now if I was to come back here, and run 8008 /hi still %20 working. There we go. It's still working on 8008. So it's very, very easy to make those kind of changes. Okay, so let's jump back. The next thing we're going to talk about is Gradle. Who uses Gradle here? Not many people. Who uses Maven? Loads of people. I'm going to ask the question, who uses Ant? Whoa, that was gritted teeth there. I was like, oh. Anyone on a cool makefile or anything like that? No. One couple of SBT. Who's heard of SBT? I think it's called the Simple Build Tool, right? It's the most ironic titled build framework I've ever seen in my life. I will task anyone to try and create an SBT file from scratch without copy paste. No one will be able to do it. So Gradle, we did another report which is Java build tools, and in this report we actually compared the different build tools. For speed was one of them, and we actually noticed that Maven and Gradle weren't actually too far away. One of the things which Gradle does do very, very well is something called the daemon. So here you can see there's just a dash daemon at the end. And the daemon, the Gradle daemon, is something that will kind of run in the background, so that it's already warmed up. It's all ready for a build to be passed to it. And then once you continue to push builds, those builds will be passed to the build daemon. So your initialization period only gets hit once. Obviously, for the big tasks, if you have huge Gradle build files, this is going to be a lesser problem. Ant and Ivy. Ivy is a really, really bad dependency management environment. People talk about Maven downloading the internet. Well, Ivy is just really, really slow and really, really poor. This is mostly from Ivy rather than Ant. In terms of using Gradle or Maven or even Ant across IDEs and things like that, it's pretty much supported virtually everywhere. In fact, some of these even may actually have changed, where a lot of these may actually be built in to IDEs and so forth, rather than installed as a plugin. Even then, if you wanted to install it as a plugin, nothing's going to really take you too much time. But Gradle used to be this kind of build tool where people had integration problems. It's not there. It's not like that anymore. Gradle is a first-class build citizen, just like Maven. One of the other things about Gradle before we move on is Gradle, obviously, to actually create your Gradle scripts, it uses Groovy as its DSL. So you're actually almost writing code as your build scripts rather than your usual regular XML style. And a lot of people maybe are a little bit frightened of this because it's like some crazy new language. Who uses Gradle here? Groovy. A few people. Groovy is very, very similar actually to Java. There isn't that big gap that you would have as if you were going from Java to maybe Scala. In fact, most Java code will actually even compile in a Groovy compiler. So don't be frightened of if you wanted to move to Groovy but you're worried because it uses if you want to move to Gradle but you're worried because it uses that Groovy DSL, don't be frightened of it. Give it a go, and you'll be surprised how quick you pick it up. Okay, how many IntelliJ users do we have? Everyone's proud with that one. Love IntelliJ. How many Eclipse users? And I'm an Eclipse user actually, so I'll put my hand up. How many RAD users? No? Okay. How many NetBeans users? Just the Oracle guys? Couple there. And how many proper hardcore developers? Vi, Vim, Emacs, whatever you want to choose. One at the back. Excellent. Okay, now I'm an Eclipse. As I mentioned, I was an IBMer for 12 years, right? So I was injecting myself with RAD for 12 years. I've only just recently come off that, and now I'm an Eclipse user. I've tried to move to IntelliJ a few times actually, but my kind of background really stops me. I'm deep in Eclipse world. So I wasn't really. I can understand why some people might want to go to IntelliJ. One of the big reasons is performance, stability, maybe. As I am not an IntelliJ user, I kind of used the lazy web here. So I said, help me write a presentation, please. I'm looking for reasons as to why people want to move to IntelliJ. And interestingly, there wasn't a key feature. I got quite a lot of response back. But you'll notice that across these responses, people tend to choose a number of different things, and they're all very subtle kind of features. So from talking to a lot of IntelliJ users, what it feels like, it's the experience, the full look and feel of IntelliJ, which people love and go for. And I was talking to one of the guys from IntelliJ and I asked him why, how do you discuss IntelliJ and Eclipse perhaps when someone comes up to you and says, why should I use IntelliJ? And the answer he gave me was, it's very much like buying a car. Okay, if you look at a number of cars and you drive them, you have you get that feeling, you get that understanding with the car, and afterwards you think, this is the one I prefer. And you would feel actually quite bad if you had to choose, that other one, that one that you didn't want because you've driven this car. Why do you like that one? It's the look, it's the feel, it's the personality of the car, and it's very similar with your IDE. And you spend so much time in your IDE, it's a very personal thing. Okay, wasted time, and this is the classic image of compiling and removing non-essential tasks in an otherwise awesome process. And one of the tools we're going to talk about here is JRebel from Zero Turnaround. Who's heard of JRebel? Oh wow, good number of people. Okay, so JRebel is a tool. Who's using JRebel? Okay, good number of people as well. What JRebel is, this is the developer's cycle whereby you in your IDE of choice, you make your code changes. Then you try and build, compile, deploy, package, create the what am I saying? Create the state that you need in order to find your changed code, and then test your changed code, and then you go back into that loop, and you're forever in this cycle. On the left-hand side, you have productive things. You develop your code, you test your code. On the right-hand side, all this build, compilation, packaging, deploying, waiting is unproductive. And what JRebel does is it cuts out that unproductive work, so you're constantly in this productive loop. So essentially, you can go into a code change, test, code change. You don't need to run through unproductive work. So let's give you a quick demo of that working. I need to restart my server actually. So I'm going to start this server. And to install JRebel onto your environment, it's just a simple Java agent. So you deploy, you create just by a simple JVM property, you add the Java agent to your environment. And we're going to be using the Pet Clinic because we're a cool company, and Pet Clinic, no one uses that, right, for their demos, so we'll use the Pet Clinic application. Here's my Pet Clinic application in my workspace, and in fact, if I come here, whoa, there's the Pet Clinic application running in my Tomcat environment. Now I can click around on here as you'd expect, and everything works nicely. If I wanted to make a change though, like let's say I wanted to change this welcome message at the top. If I wanted to make that change, I'd come into my IDE. I'd find the place where it's actually being grabbed from. In this case, it's actually a JSP that grabs the welcome text from a messages.properties file. So I would come here and I'd say welcome to Voxxed. Has Voxxed Vienna got a space in it? No, Voxxed Vienna. Hit save. Come back. Now normally I would have to do my full build then, my full package, and then deploy my application again. But with JRebel I've done none of that. All I need to do is just refresh my browser, and all of a sudden I'll get my updated code live into my runtime. And this of course is the same for Java resources, which you've just seen, as well as Java code. So if I was to come back to my code, in fact, let's show you exactly what we're going to change first. If I click on Add Owner, we get this form. I can click on Add Owner, and we've got validation on every single input box. If I was to change this, let's say I don't want my validation on my first name here, I could change that by going into my owner validator file, and let's do some reformatting because we're Java developers and that's what's cool. So I'm going to reformat that, or there we go. In this extracted method, I'm going to comment out maybe this first name, and in fact let's add a new key here. So I'm going to say last name required, hit save, go into my messages.properties, let's have down here last name required. Last name is required. Hit save, come straight back here and click add owner. First one has disappeared, second one has not. Let's just copy that. It was an uppercase R, so hit save. So again, it's very, very easy to, when you make errors, to fix them and go through that again. That's just saved me 3 or 4 redeploys. So with JRebel, you can do that very, very quickly. It's actually quite similar to Hotswap, if those of you have used Hotswap. But with Hotswap, you have to do it in a debug mode, and there are certain changes you can make and certain changes you can't make. So if you tend to do a change within a method body, Hotswap can do that no problem. If you try and add a new method, change method signatures, change superclasses, all those kind of things, Hotswap will say you need to do a republish or a redeploy. Any questions so far? Oh, we're good. Okay, so let's jump across back here. Who loves free stuff? Free stuff. Everyone loves free stuff. Here's some free stuff. As JRebel is from Zero Turnaround, if you did want to do an eval, in fact, what I'll do is I'll tweet this a little bit later. If you go to 0t.ee/Voxxed Vienna JR, all you have to do is an eval, a free eval, 2-week eval, and not only do you get a free t-shirt, you will also get 2 weeks of redeploy free development. How good's that? So feel free to grab that. I'll show you a slide at the end as well. Okay. So JBoss Forge, who's a Java EE developer here? Quite a few people. And is that servlets or more than servlets? Hands up if more than servlets. Okay, proper Java EE developers. Excellent. So JBoss Forge. JBoss Forge is a tool that is used to assist you with all the artifact creation that Java EE requires of you. So it scaffolds a bunch of work around your business logic so that you can deploy your artifact with all your Java EE goodness around the edges. Rapid development, and it's also plugin based. JBoss Forge, actually, is that next? JBoss Forge in action. So JBoss Forge, here I've actually got the JBoss tools installed on my environment. I'm not sure how big this is going to be. We'll see. But I've got this JBoss tools enabled, the plugin installed on my Eclipse environment. You can also do this on the command line if you so choose. I just find it nicer to do in Eclipse because it can create some nice projects and things within Eclipse. Okay, that's okay. So from here, if I type, wow, that was slow. Oh no, I wasn't there. Okay, so if I type ls, I can almost I can interact with the command line as if I'm pretty much in my directory structure, and from there I can actually see just the directories which are projects, Eclipse projects in this case. I can actually I have, if I hit tab, I can see I've got a bunch of commands I can run. My first command is going to create a new project. So let's say project new, and if I hit tab, I can see. Wow, if I hit tab, I can see exactly what I have available to me. I'm going to name it, so I'll say named Voxxed demo. I'll have a top level package, and my top level package will be Voxxed Vienna.demo. Hit return, and that's going to effectively create me my package. If I now come out of this is going to be a Maven package as well. So if I find Voxxed demo here, I've got all what I would expect. So I've got my Maven Java source tree, my Maven my test source tree, and I've also got my POM down here because this is obviously created it as a Maven project. If I was to in fact go back to my Forge console and do an ls, I can see that there. It's actually already, when it created the package, the project, it changed directory into that package name. Actually, I think I can do a cat as well. So I can see my Maven output there. The next thing I want to do, I wonder if I can do clear actually. I think I can. Yes, I can. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a JPA entity so I can see what's available. JPA new entity. And then from there, I can see exactly what I want. So I'm going to grab a new provider. And my provider is going to be, let's go for Hibernate. We all love it. What else am I going to do? I'm going to give it a name. Named my entity. So we create this, and it automatically created me It's automatically created me a persistence XML. It's automatically created me my entity class with my usual column names, getters, setters, and annotations as well. From here, if I wanted to, I could. From here, I could say, and now I'm in my entity.java. So if I do an ls now, I actually get a view of my class. So this is. If I do an ls now, I actually get a view of my class, so I can see fields and I can see methods and things like that. If I wanted to actually add some constraints, I can say constraint add, and then from here I can choose my property. No. On property. So I can go on property. What properties do we have? I'll do it on my ID. I can add my actual constraint. What constraints do we have? I could say, let's just say not null. Actually, I think that might even be there already. That is a lot of text just for a single annotation. But if you were to do much more complex annotations, then that's actually all it created. But you can script it as well, so you can have much larger entities with much larger and more complex constraints. Once I've done that. One thing I can do is actually, if I wanted to test that really simply, I can do something called scaffolding. And with a scaffold, I think it's scaffold.generate. Yeah, scaffold generate. With scaffold generate, I can say, all right, I want to, let's get my targets. Let's choose Voxxed Vienna demo.star. And I'm going to choose my provider. In this case, I can choose AngularJS or Faces. Let's choose Faces. This is now going to provide me with enough that I can actually test my application. So I can now, if I wanted to, build and deploy this, and it will provide me with forms that I can use to add information into my entities and things like that without needing to put an entire application around it. So you can actually do almost like, I don't want to say it's kind of between your unit tests and your integration tests. I can obviously just hit build straight here, and this is actually going to build me my artifact that I can deploy. So it's actually really useful, particularly if you do want to script up a whole load of information and throw that script around rather than your artifacts. Okay, that's JBoss Forge. Any questions on JBoss Forge? Okay. Who recognizes this guy? Gene Hackman. Anyone know what film this is from? No? No? Someone say Crimson Tide then? Did someone say that? Or did I hear that? Someone said it up there. Crimson Tide. Really good film, actually. Now, there's one scene where Gene Hackman was on top of the submarine with Denzel Washington. And he's had this big old cigar, and he's smoking this cigar because, this is the last time he's going to be on top of the submarine before it goes down for a while. And he says to Denzel Washington, this quote, "I don't trust air I can't see," as he's smoking this big old cigar. And this actually weirdly made me think about quality testing and performance testing. I know that sounds weird, but it's very important, because as a developer, when you actually write your code, if you don't actually write those tests, if you don't actually get those results back that you can view to say this code, the quality of this code is okay, or the performance of this code is good, a developer has no trust in their code at all unless they can see their results. They have no trust in their code. And one of the things which we want to do always is fail early. And I was actually I saw a session with Jonas Bohner, who says we don't actually want to fail early. What we want to do is we want to learn early. We want to understand as much as we can about our application as early as we can in the cycle, because that is when it's at its most cheapest to fix our code. Typically, when we're talking about quality, we do our unit tests, we do our integration tests, we do our automated test, we do our weighted test, our load test, our scaling tests. We do a whole bunch of tests all the way through our environment, even up to production where we do our smoke tests and so on. Performance should be no different to that. It's just a type of test. Yes, we can test different things about performance at different stages, and we will use different tools. But other than that, they're exactly the same. Now, another tool which we produce called XRebel from Zero Turnaround, it's a tool that allows you to profile very, very easily during development. So at development time, this is the time when people will typically only reactively profile their code. In other words, they will only profile their code when a problem exists or when they believe a problem to exist. But typically, you don't know problems exist because unless you're actually doing things under load, under stress testing, scaling your environment, you don't understand where the performance problems could potentially be. So one of the things that XRebel does is allows you to see problems in your code that could potentially be problems. And that's a key part because if we're talking about quality testing and you're writing unit tests, checking for a null here and there, that kind of thing, okay, that's a potential problem in your production environment. It might be absolutely fine for things to return null or for methods to not check for null, okay? But these unit tests give you potential problems, and they solve as many problems as they can so that you don't find these potential problems. This is exactly what XRebel is doing from a performance point of view. Let me give you a very quick demo. In fact, in our pet clinic application, we were already using XRebel, and that's what this little toolbar in this left-hand side is doing. And this toolbar, if I was to open it up, it'll give you a whole bunch of information about the current request that you have just invoked. Now, XRebel actually works as a Java agent on your JVM process, very, very similar to JRebel. And so what it does is every single time you make a request into the server and you get this response back, it's going to attach this widget into your response. And this widget is just going to be rendered by your browser, just like any other piece of application that you have there. So it's just a little bit of JavaScript and things like that, a bit of HTML5. Now, every single time I click through, we are providing information based on that click through. So, for example, if I was to click on Find Owners here, in fact, let me do that again because I know since I restarted the server, that's just going to be initialization. Oops. There. So I click on that and it took 42 milliseconds to load. That seems reasonable. There's a small amount of information there. If I didn't have XRebel now, I would think, yeah, I don't see any performance problem with this code. I'll push it, and until later, when we actually do some real stress test performance style thing, we might find a problem. Now, with this small amount of code, what we've actually seen here, and this is vanilla Spring application code, by the way, there are 37 I/O queries being called. 37 I/O queries just from this small amount of data. This small amount of data should, even though it actually grabs information from a few tables, it should only, with a couple of joins, maybe need 2 or 3. I can click on this and we can dig through into what is actually calling the I/O problems. So here I can see from this method call, we can see a select statement here, and as I can see here, this is a JDBC request, but we will be able to catch things because this is at the kind of data source level. We'll be able to catch I/O from JDBC, from JPA, from Hibernate. Who's Hibernate users here? Keep your hand up if you believe that one line of Hibernate is one I/O request. Okay, one guy at the top. Right, one line of Hibernate could be a ridiculous number of SQL, ridiculous number of touches to the database. And unless configured correctly, you will almost certainly hit what is called an N+1 problem, which we're going to look at here. In this case, this N+1 problem was actually driven by a JDBC problem. So here, from this method, we do a single select statement from the owners table. And here we can see we grab the owner ID, the first name, the last name, and so on. Here we're actually just doing a wildcard where because we didn't add any text into that text box. As we carry on, we can then see, in fact, from this SQL statement, it took 0.1 milliseconds to run, and it returned us 10 rows. So we get 10 records back from the database. As we carry on, we can see a further 10 SQL statements which are being driven here, which return 13 rows. And if I was to open these 10 SQL statements, what we can see is we're digging into the pets table. We get information about every single pet based on an owner ID. Owner ID 1, owner ID 2, owner ID 3. So what we've essentially done is we've made our first request to get all owners, and then we take each one of those records individually and create an SQL request or an IO request for those individual records. And this is classic n+1 problem, where 1 is our first SQL statement, n is the number of return records we get, and then we make that many SQL queries. If I was to get 1 million back, I'd in total get call 1,000,001 SQL statements. In fact, we actually go further here. We actually get 13 rows. Where are we? 13 rows back from this table, and we actually then call from our types table, which I don't actually believe we even view on that previous table. From the types method, I'm guessing we're using the pet ID and the pet name there. So we're almost like recursing n+1 problem here. So it's very, very easy to spot these in development, because we can actually set thresholds. Just because this runs very, very fast in a development environment, you try and scale this up. If you want 100 people to invoke that page at the same time, you're going to all of a sudden get 3,700 IO requests to a database. And this is when you start finding these problems. It's found much, much later in the environment, and guess who fixes it? It's the same developer that likely wrote that code, except lots of other developers have piled code on top. So what we actually want to do is we want to fix these problems as we write them, and that's exactly what XRebel does. It sits in the background, and when you cross a threshold, which you can set, it will automatically say, this is a problem. So here, this is red or orange because 37 crossed our threshold. If I came here and I said, actually, I want 38 to be my threshold and hit save, that's just then information because it hasn't crossed our threshold. It's just turned white. So I'm going to put that back to 20. And the reason that this is offered is because every web app is different. Okay. A couple of other things that we can do is we can do something called application profiling, which is understanding where we are spending our time in our application. And we can't necessarily say use absolute values here because your production and your development environment are going to be very, very different. However, what we can say is use relative percentages. So we can say this is your cumulative percentage. As you go through this call stack, your percentage will slowly drop from 100% down. And as you spend more time in specific methods, we can say to you, these are the methods that we are highlighting. These are going to be your potential bottlenecks in production. And we can see straight away 13% is spent in this method and so forth. So you can spot exactly where your potential problems are and fix them through that. Okay. That's enough about XRebel. Any other questions about XRebel? No. So the question is, what's the performance overhead of XRebel? And the performance overhead of XRebel is anything from 50 to 100%, which may shock you because you think, oh my God, how is this acceptable for a profiler? But because this is a development profiler only, the overhead doesn't actually matter that much because as a developer, you're just clicking through. The performance overhead is actually yourself because the amount of time it actually takes you to go and click here, click there, that's actually the overhead. You're not expecting this profiler to be run in a production environment, and you're not expecting thousands of records to go through. So as I mentioned, you have different tools for different environments. XRebel is a development-focused tool rather than production. Any other questions? Is it free to use? XRebel is not. XRebel is actually a tool which is licensed the same as JRebel, which is every year subscription model. But it's a paid full tool. Yeah.
Your example, you're using it with the Spring and Hibernate.
Mm-hmm.
How will it work if you're not using those frameworks, or let's say if your communication is not HTTP based, but let's say Ajax or WebSockets or whatever?
Mm-hmm. So the question is, here I'm just using it with Spring and or JWC. How well does it work with other frameworks? So initially we actually just focused on HTTP requests. Ajax actually does work with Ajax as well. So if you, as you click through, the bar will actually update as you click through. We also work with RESTful endpoints. So if you had a RESTful endpoint, for example, what I would do is actually I would grab a new, after Pet Clinic, I'll just write XRebel, and this will give me my Ninja banner. And what this will do is, as I go through and click some things here, let's go home, do some stuff like that. As I click through, you'll actually see it all culminating here. So this is effectively, if you was to make invocations to your RESTful endpoint, you'll be able to pick things up here. One other thing which we're actually working on right now is something like XRebel, which is going to actually run in a CI environment. So the idea is, where you use this XRebel for your development environment, we want to provide a tool as well which will run alongside your Jenkins builds with your automated tests, giving you a dashboard saying these are the problems, or these are the suspected problems, your regressions in performance with your new code. But that's something that we're going to be betaing very soon. Okay, I'm going to hold any more questions till the end, actually, because I've just got a couple more slides that I want to follow through on. Oh, more free stuff. I'll show you that. I'll show you that at the end. Arquillian. Who uses Arquillian here? Okay, a couple of people. Arquillian's actually a really, really great tool. It's a tool that allows you to perform integration-style tests, but with a unit test kind of look and feel. One of the ways it's described is taking your tests to the container. And this is about, if you want to go beyond unit testing your code, if you don't want to have to constantly mock things and create these mocking classes, what you can do is you can write tests in a very unit style way, which deploy your code into an application for you, run those tests against it, and then give you the results of those tests in a unit test way. How do we use it? Well, in this case, we need to say at the very top, where am I? There. We need to say at the very top, run with Arquillian.class, and then in our deployment method, we actually use shrink-wrap to create us our artifact. And this is effectively saying, I want you to add these packages in your application. These are my deployment XMLs and things like that. Whatever you need to package up in your artifact. You then, as a result of putting these environments, putting these tests, putting this code into a container, you can make use of injection services. So you can say, I want to inject an instance of service bean, an instance of repository manager, and it's going to inject your own instances of your code automatically for you. Your tests are very, very simple. So here, all we're doing is we're setting a key value property. We're making sure that this is a non-null after that, and then we delete it. So we have to clean up after ourselves for the container's sake. But our tests are very, very straightforward, very, very simple, and we will see the results in a kind of JUnit way. You'll have green, red, depending on the outcomes of your tests. So I've only got a couple of minutes left, 1 minute left. And so in summary, it's really, really important you care about your time. You've got a free day today. It's leap year day. Okay, this is a day that we wouldn't normally have. So it's really, really important to make use of your time, and do try out one of these tools today, because this is a free day. Don't lose sight of your goal. Very, very important. Make sure that when you do choose tools, when you do choose technologies, that you're not actually doing so because it's fast. You're doing so because it meets the needs of your projects. And do explore productivity tools. Don't be that person that I showed you in that image where they didn't have time to do that. Productivity tools are incredibly important, and making small investments at the start will actually affect how you go forward and develop. That's everything I had. If anyone has any further questions, this is the XRebel shirt as well, slightly different shirt, but you can do both to get shirts as well. Any further questions? Well, thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the session. Cheers.